Hi, everyone. I'm Katherine Sanders from Sanders Consulting, and this is one of the conversations in my series of conversations about the Surgeon General's framework for workplace mental health and well-being. Today, I am delighted to have Travonnie Mackey here with me to talk about workplace well-being from her perspective as an former educator and also as a consultant, and a number of other career experiences that she's had in that journey. So, Travonnie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. And if you could start by telling us a little bit about your background and your expertise and interest in workplace well-being, that would be wonderful.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me, Catherine. I've been looking forward to our conversation. I'm Travonnie. I live right outside of Nashville, use she, her pronouns, and I have spent my career trying to make sure people feel set up for success. I grew up as probably the only little brown girl in most of the spaces I sat in. In elementary school, I was typically the only one in my class. At daycare, it was me and my sister. When I went to church, I was surrounded by family, and so I felt that cultural presence. But in most other educational spaces, it was just me. And so making sense of the world from that vantage point was really interesting and led me to Howard University. When I stepped on campus at an HBCU for the first time, I was like, wow, there are people who look like me, who love learning, who go to class, who feel excited about what they're doing every day. And I would not be the only, and I'd be surrounded by people in my identity group who care about the things that I care about and want to be successful. And so it was life altering for me to study business at Howard, and it really has influenced my trajectory. I went to school for business because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that everything was business. My mom was an entrepreneur, and so I watched her run a business as a kid. And I was like, I need to know how to do that, whatever that looks like. So I'll go study business, and I learned so much about management and people leadership in that experience, but didn't find a career pathway. Did some Wall Street internships and said, this is definitely not for me. Fell in love with the mission of Teach for America and said, yes, that's the thing. Was a big sister, big brother, big sister, and I spent some time in my little sister's school and was disheartened that she hated it. It's like, what? You're so smart. Like, why do you hate school? Wanted to be a part of the solution. So became a teacher. Loved supporting my children. I thought it was the best job ever. Would fight with my partner from time to time because he was like, you live there. I was like, well, like there's just so much to do. I loved everything that it meant to be an educator. When I became a mom, I needed to do a life adjustment and found myself leaving the classroom, not leaving schoolwork, but needed to get out of the classroom to find a better sense of balance. When I did that, I watched the teacher who replaced me struggle, like a teacher who cared a ton about kids, but wasn't seeing his impact. And so I offered to be his coach. I did not know what that meant. I just knew that like he needed help and I felt guilty and maybe I can do something here to support, and didn't know that coaching was a career. Didn't know that that was a thing I could do, but it fit. It felt right. It was so powerful to not necessarily be the person giving direct support for students, even though I did very much love that. What I liked is saying, hey, leader of children, do you know your power? Do you know how awesome you are? Do you know what you can do here? And do you see the stuff that's in the way? And let me help you do that. So I fell into coaching, and coaching has been the consistent thread across my journey. I moved into district coaching. I coached through a nonprofit, just supporting teachers, new teachers. And then I moved into a talent team role at a nonprofit. Same thing, coaching. This time I'm coaching managers. I'm coaching adult leaders and trying to get a sense of where these leaders of teams and leaders of business units are missing the mark or not having the resources they needed. And I loved that. Still felt like coaching, still felt like, hey, leader, do you see your power? Do you see the thing you're good at? Do you see the stuff in the way? How do I help? And so I didn't need to be the person delivering the support, but I really enjoyed just clearing the way for people to feel how powerful they are in their roles.
Mm.
Uh, Moved into consulting, ran into a member of my network who said, hey, you should do that thing you're doing for your leaders for lots of organizations. There's lots of people who need that same conversation, but on a broader, more systemic scale. And I loved that too. I was like, this is amazing. I get to see my impact expanded. And so I didn't pursue consulting, I didn't pursue coaching, but they found me because I love that lens. And so I'll just close that background story by saying what I think I enjoy most about my work is that I went from only brown girl to brown girl who helps people make systems that work for other brown girls.
Mm.
And I'm most energized by that. I enjoy conversations, particularly with white leaders who are trying to get a sense of why their leadership isn't resonating with staff, and not just for brown girls, but in general, like kind of suck at inclusion. Like no one feels like their voices matter. And I care about that, but I don't know why I'm getting it wrong. And I love pulling my coaching lens, pulling my educator lens and saying, oh, there's a skill gap here. There's a knowledge gap here. There's an orientations gap. The way you're approaching this is going to rub people the wrong way. And then now how do we fix the system so that all of your leaders think about their work like this? And so really grateful for the way my journey did all of these unexpected turns, because I feel really set up for success to support clients now. So that's
Mm.
me.
Well, I love how you're able to work at all these different levels of the individual one-on-one coaching, and then of course the group coaching, and then as you were starting to explain the systems changes, right? I mean, I think um, from my background as a work systems engineer, we need all of those different levels of intervention at the same time for some of these changes to actually take root and be sustainable. So I'm glad to see how many levels you and your colleague at Impact are working at.
Yeah, I skipped that part.
Yeah.
Recently founded an org dedicated to making sure people have those system supports. And so Impact is new to my journey, but very much loving that part too.
Yeah, well, we'll spend more time with that. I do want to ask you something that I ask everybody in this series. I'm going to show an image of the Surgeon General's
Mm.
framework here. Am I doing it correctly?
Yeah, I
Travonnie,
can
can you see it? Okay.
see that.
Um, I'm wondering, as you look at this, what stands out for you and why?
Yeah. All of it is amazing. And I was so grateful that you shared it with me. I feel like I reference it regularly in my work. The two areas that I zoom in on are on the left side here, the opportunity for growth and mattering at work. They are so inextricably linked that it's hard to see them separately like that. But um, that's where I feel like I've spent my career supporting people. The mattering at work really shows up in the way, especially in the consulting work I've been doing, in the way organizations value their talent through compensation strategy, through performance management design, that we send lots of messages and signals to people about their autonomy and about how much they can contribute to the organization. And so we leave people feeling like, well, I don't know if all the stuff I'm doing every day matters. And I don't know how valuable I am. I don't know if the org is going to discard me in layoffs in a couple of weeks. Like I really just don't know how I fit. And I came here to make a difference. And so helping to move the stuff out of the way that prevents people from feeling like I spend all my time here, but it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't matter. I'm not valued here. That has been important for me. And then I think right behind that comes this opportunity for learning and growth and accomplishment. And so you feel set up for success. You feel like, oh, I mastered that. Let me take on this next challenge because I'm still really excited to contribute. So I think those two have been really centered in my work lately.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask you a little bit more about the mattering at work?
Sure, sure.
So from what I heard you describe, it sounds to me like you're pointing to not only people being nice to each other, and I'm using air quotes here if people are just listening, but that whole like pat on the back or tell people that they've done a good job, appreciating.
Yeah.
But you're actually talking about the structures of work that
Yeah.
actually send these messages to people day in and day out about whether or not they matter. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I like the way you referenced it in the pat on the back, because there's so many factors that contribute to who we do that for.
Mm,
And the lack of clarity on what it means to do a good job is usually the root cause. It's everybody show up, all hands on deck, like just do the stuff until the stuff is done. But we didn't yet pause to figure out what does it mean for the stuff to be done or for it to be done well. And so the pats on the back either feel performative, feels
mm.
like you're just trying to placate me because you can tell I'm frustrated about something, or they feel like they don't match my compensation. They don't match the way you're telling me I'm not getting a raise or I'm not getting a promotion. There's just a disconnect. And so I don't know how much this matters. And so I hate when I run into staff who feel like I don't know what the point is. Like fortunately, I care a lot about my stakeholders. That's who I do this work for. And because of the people I'm in business to support, I know I matter. But if I think of the messages that I'm getting from my manager or from the organization more broadly, I'm hearing the opposite. I'm hearing that like you're replaceable and we don't, we'll move on if this is not where you want to be, get on board.
So in my mind, what's popping up are our educators in the PK-12 system, right? Which there are all these messages from society about
Mhm.
what matters and what we're willing to invest money in. And yet at the same time, we hold people accountable for things that they sometimes I think can't have an impact on, or it would be a big stretch. So could you tell me a little bit about how you see, I know you have done work with
Mhm.
school districts. They're not your only clients, but I know you have done some of it. So if I would love to hear more about your experiences about mattering at work and opportunities for growth when you think about educators.
Yep. Yep. So I think one thing that I hear so often from my friends in education, I'm still very close to people who do the work every day, is that it feels like their dignity is always in question.
Mm,
It's little things like, I didn't get a lunch break today. Nobody even cares. It's little things like, I'm not the expert on the work that needs to get done. No one assumes that. And so it feels like there's an opportunity for schools to reevaluate the way they do performance management. And as a teacher, I felt very frustrated with our performance management system. It felt like a waste of time for both my manager and me. The principal was like giving me feedback that maybe was helpful, but never answered the question of overall, am I doing a good enough job? I never knew the answer to that. And so because I didn't hear that ever, I was there 6 to 6 every day, weekends. Like I need to go set up a new center. I need like every day getting a sense of that was miserable because they didn't pause to figure out what success looked like. Um, I'm really struggling with, you know, the missed opportunities there because it doesn't feel like school districts want to change that.
mm.
And that's been a barrier for me in supporting some of my clients where they say, like, we know this doesn't work and we're not changing it. Like they're just, this is what it's been. When I moved out of the classroom role into a coach role, that got worse because I was accountable for data that I didn't get to control. And so instead of being accountable for the development of my teachers, I was accountable for student data. What that means is I'm going to go around my teachers and teach the kids, right? If I find myself to be better skilled at something, then it's very easy for me to follow that pattern. And what it leaves that teacher feeling is, well, where's my autonomy? Where's my dignity? Why am I not the expert here? But I was not accountable to that. And so without that self accountability, I could have caused a lot of harm and left a lot of teachers feeling like, I know you're the one doing it every day, but I don't trust that you know what you're doing. And so when I think about what a performance management system has the opportunity to do, it's to separate the outcomes and the inputs, to separate the metrics and the tactics, and hold people accountable differently for those things. And so this is what the data needs to be. How you get there, I don't care. I really don't care. I don't care what lesson you teach. I don't care what curriculum you use. Like, I don't care the order you do it in. And I think because we're so focused on those accountability metrics, we're sending messages that we don't think teachers know how to get there. And that's their biggest pain point. It's like, hush, let me teach my kids. Now, I think the caveat is that we've had a lot of transition in education in the last 20 years where there's no stability. There's so much turnover that you have new teachers all the time. And so those are missed opportunities to make sure if you were to give new teachers that level of autonomy, they would know what to do with it. Some of them don't, right? They're new to the workforce. They've probably done a wonderful teacher prep program, but there's nothing like, I've got 30 kids staring at me every day, expecting me to know what I'm doing. And those are the teachers who do need more handholding. They do need more, hey, teach this lesson instead of that one, do it in this order. And I think, like maybe the one area where I might be critical here is that just because you've done it for a long time doesn't mean you don't need those things. And we've had a really horrible track record of saying, hey, veteran teacher, you're not competent. Like, you don't have the skills to do this job. And either, like, here's the resources, or let's find a role where you can support these kids that is a better fit for your strengths. And so in lieu of that, we've just let everyone continue to be in the classroom. We're not changing the way we evaluate performance. It's not helpful for the leader. It's not helpful for the staff member. And it leaves the teacher feeling like, well, you assume I don't know what I'm doing. What's the point, right? That dignity feels like it's constantly in question. I hope that made sense. I feel like I was following lots.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have me, I have a lot of ideas floating around in my engineer brain. So one of the first things I'm wondering about is the opportunity for this kind of collaboration. So you mentioned like new teachers might need extra like mentorship, or and existing teachers might need just a little time to have their lunch or use the restroom. I worked on a project some years ago with an insurance company, and with the CMO of an insurance company that insured a lot of K-12 teachers. And one of their biggest things was UTIs, right? Because there is no time for anyone, any adult, to have a moment by themselves, right? Because you're alone in a classroom with these little people. And I don't know, Travonnie, do you see that like as chronic understaffing, or is it just the way the structure of the school day goes? Is there just not enough teachers, or is there just the way we've structured the school day? If we did it differently, could there be these collaborative moments for growth and for just support?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's both of those things. I think, in one of your other videos, my teammate Natri spoke to this idea that we expect schools to do all the things. I couldn't agree with that more. And so what that means is we have the kids all day, right? They're there for a long time. There's a ton of research that says kids can't learn this long. There's lots of countries where school is a half day and they go home for lunch. Like, that is normalized in other parts of the world in the way that it's not here, because capitalism says mom's got to get to work, you need to be at the school, and then you need to stay there until childcare can happen in the afternoon. So I think because of that, we've started to do things like count instructional minutes. How many instructional minutes can you dedicate to math? How many instructional minutes can you dedicate to reading and social studies? And it is segmented that way, and there are expectations about it. And so because of that, there is literally no time left for teachers to have an hour planning block. Like, that's rare. In one of the schools I worked at, I pitched this idea that we might consolidate their planning blocks. So take 2 days of planning and do it on one, but it would mean that next day you don't have a planning at all. And the teachers were like, I can't. Like, ideally, that sounds great, but the idea that now on this day I have no break, that doesn't work either. And so it feels like the options don't even make sense. But we've tried to pack too many things into a day, and so there's no space for it. So I would say it's a little bit about the structure. Staffing might be a part of it. I've been in schools where there are lots of people, and I think people wonder, like, what do you do all day? And then I've been in schools where it's like, oh, I know you don't have time to help me, but can you watch my kids while I go to the bathroom? So I think there's a balance there. And what it leads me to zoom out to is workforce planning
Mm,
and to what extent school leaders have that skill. I think more often than not, these are some assumptions I'm making here. School leaders are doing what they've always done, doing what they've seen when they were teachers, when they were assistant principals, in terms of how they structure their staff. And so I sit on a board for a charter, and that's my role. My role is to look at, do you have enough people in the right roles in the organization so that people can develop and take breaks and have space. Um, and I think about our orientations that impact around space. It's part of our values that people have time to think. You cannot
mm.
solve deep problems if you don't think. And so we're saying, hey, teachers, you don't really have time to use the bathroom or eat lunch, but please solve really rigorous problems across these 30 children that we place in front of you every day. And sorry, like, we can't help you if you're stuck, right? And by the way, do it the way we said. Do it with this curriculum and in this order. So I feel like there are just so many reasons why we're not getting that right.
And why we see so many teachers like become exhausted and question whether or not they can even stay in the profession, right? I mean, not
Yeah,
unlike our healthcare system.
yeah,
But thank you for drawing my attention to questioning the length of the school day, because I talk about that all the time when we're talking about work systems, that the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week are all just made up, right? And if they're not working, then we should re-examine them. And I hadn't transposed that to school time,
yeah.
right? So I mean,
Day
it's
is day is filled from bell to bell. And I remember being a teacher and feeling pressured to make sure the minute my kids walked in the room, there was something on their desk to do, the very second, because these are instructional minutes and they're precious. That is not how learning works. Learning works with space. Learning works when you have time to connect with the other people in the room, where you bring that adrenaline down and you can just feel safe to make a mistake. But there is pressure to pack content in the day in a way that definitely translates to the way the teacher's day is packed. And professional development days are packed. It's like, actually, shh, let me think, and then I can probably solve this on my own. And then
Mhm.
maybe you would trust me to solve other problems, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's I hear what you're saying. There's so much like conflict between the content we keep pushing and then the process we know is necessary for people to learn or to problem solve or to connect with each other. I mean, all of those kids, just like all other humans, want to
Yeah.
matter and
Yeah.
want to know that they belong.
Yeah.
And that isn't part of um, you know, instructional minutes, right? So
Exactly.
yeah.
So
Oh,
you
thank you
gotta
for that. I really enjoy thinking about this through this new lens for me anyway. So Travonnie, do you have any resources or guidance that you would give people who want to start moving their workplace toward, more well-being?
yeah. So one that hadn't popped up for me until just now is the fact that our organization is called Impact with an E. And you spoke to it just now, and this idea that, yes, instructional minutes, like, you need this many to master all these skills. That's the tangible impact with an I that we're also accustomed to orienting to. But if you don't do the E side, the empathy side, you don't get those instructional minutes. You don't maximize those. And there's a saying that I use over and over. It feels very cliche, but people don't care what you know until they know that you care. That's what we're balancing here. And so if you're always focused on the data, we're not hitting the data points, and you aren't collecting any data on how do people feel about being in this environment, which I think is what the Surgeon General's model does really well, you're never going to hit those data points. And I think schools, like, we understand we're not hitting the data points. These schools get added to the failing school list every year, and we have not found an appropriate way to balance those two things. So that's maybe one. I don't know if I would call it a framework, but an orientation to work that feels paramount. And I don't think that leaders are are collecting enough data on that or using that data to drive decisions the way they are the things that I think are just more tangible. So that's one. I can pause and let you react to that before I go somewhere else.
No, it's so fantastic because it just in my mind, I used to work in faculty development. That's how I spent the first decade, a little bit more than a decade of my career. So working with university faculty on how people learn, and in my
Yeah.
case, young adults, and grown up people. So, which is not the same as young children, but there's such a mirroring that happens because you don't want to ask people to provide things they haven't experienced. So it's really hard when you're talking to like a university faculty member about, in your words, being empathetic with the students and their whole experience of academia has been the opposite.
Yeah.
Um, so I would have to, and I wanted to, of course, create these learning communities of university faculty that
Yeah.
were caring and collaborative. And in fact, the name of our office was creating a collaborative academic environment. And so we were trying to shift how we worked with each other so it wouldn't be as competitive and
Mhm.
isolated. And the with the how do I want to say? I want to say the false assumption that there's no emotion involved because there's this like we're in objective reality here. Here are the numbers, right? As if these aren't humans that are having emotions also, right? The numbers exist, but they are not the full story, nor sometimes even the most important story.
Right.
So yeah, you have my mind going in lots of directions about how we, if we don't work with our teachers and create a better environment for our teachers to teach, it's
Yeah.
hard to lecture them on creating a classroom environment that is empathetic and pro learning.
100%. You took my brain in two directions. One, this idea of quantifying experience and putting the numbers to the heart. And I think there are mixed feelings about that, right? Like no one wants their emotional state to be reduced to a number, but I do think numbers help us see how bad it is or how good it is in a way that hearing some anecdotal descriptions don't seem to affect people in the same way. I live off of the employee net promoter score. I think it is a fascinating data point. It's used so widely across lots of industries so that we have
Can you
lots of,
repeat what
oh,
the name of it
sure,
is?
sure. Employee net promoter score. And
Okay.
it's the one question on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to recommend this organization? And the way the data is consolidated, I think, is really fascinating. Nines and tens are your promoters. Those are people who are like, I'm gung ho about this place. I think it's amazing. Your ones through sixes are detractors. Those are your actively disengaged staff who feel like I'm probably on my way out, right? I wouldn't tell you to come here. I'm looking for something else myself. I'm just waiting for that thing to happen. Your sevens and eights are your passives who feel like I'll go do something else if something comes along, but I'm okay. I'm fine for now, right? I'm not feeling harm, or at least it's manageable. And so they're not advocates for the mission of the organization. They're definitely not in a headspace to innovate and make the place better for you. They're just navigating. They're just handling what they can handle. And so for some of my clients, it's been helpful to understand their staff on that scale and then start to problem solve around it. Where the same feedback they've been hearing is like, I'm okay, like it's not great here, but I'm not miserable. They didn't do anything with that. They didn't think about how am I trying to change this 7 to a 9? How do I get this person feeling like, tell other people to come here, bring your diverse talent network with you? Because I never thought about where a 7 needs to be a 9 for this to actually work. And they didn't think about where you've got ones and twos sitting in your organization who are probably actively working against what you're trying to build. And
Hmm.
so my guidance there is usually to acknowledge that you harmed them somewhere. Somewhere, your lack of system, your lack of empathy, your lack of support made them feel like I don't matter here. I can't grow here. I don't belong here. This place isn't for me. And then you need to ask them to move on from this organization, or give me a chance to turn it around. But you can't sit here and be actively disengaged while we're over here trying to move the org forward. It's never going to work. So I think the data and the numbers can really tell a better story sometimes,
Hmm.
and get us thinking in the right direction. And then the second place you took my brain. Thank you. Thank you for letting my long-winded frameworks just like pop up here.
I am
Um,
here for them,
this is
Travonnie.
it's like so fulfilling. This is the stuff I love to talk about. But the second framework that I feel like I'm just building in my head, I've not seen this resource yet, was this idea of giving people an experience they don't have. And I think a lot about that from the lens of the manager is so many times we're asking managers to give their staff an experience that they are not experiencing themselves. And
Mhm.
so that's required sometimes for us to change the way work feels. And it's hard. And so I think there are 4 different ways those managers show up. You're likely a sieve or a strainer where I'm having a negative experience and I'm just keeping you from experiencing the fullness of that. It's just trickling to you though. So if I'm having a negative experience, so are you. If I'm having a positive experience, so are you. I might not even know why, right? But it's just a little trickle down of what I'm getting. Then you have people who are on the opposite end of that, and they're just like a stream where I'm having a negative experience and you're getting all of it. I can't stop any of it. It's just pouring right from me to you. And I think those are places where people feel like my manager is such a cool person, but I'm not getting anything I need from them, right? Where it's like I know they're trying, but this isn't working. And so those people are likely strainers. I mean, excuse me, likely just like spouts, like just
Mm.
pouring heavily down on their staff without an intention of doing that. That's still what's happening. And so that's where I would say maybe the disempowered manager feels.
Mm.
On the other side of that, you have a manager who is a shield. And I've had the good fortune to be that for a lot of my staff in various opportunities. But hey, I'm not getting what I need, right? This system hasn't found a way to support this woman of color yet, but I'm not going to pass that to you. And I'm aware of it. I have like the support in my network to make sure I'm not broken by it so that I can pass you something better. And that's really hard to do, but that's like what we try to push in our coaching work. And then the hardest one to accomplish is the shifter. So I know what I'm getting. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to make sure my staff get exactly what they need. And I'm going to push upward. Hey, leadership team, let's do it this way. Hey, boss, I don't want you to feel judged. I don't want you to feel inadequate, but I do want you to change. And sitting in that tone requires empathy and impact. Like I have to have empathy for my dysfunctional leader. Like they are trying, they're doing their best. They're probably not getting what they need either, right? And so because we often sit in a space of when I'm being harmed, it's because you don't care about me. That we're really critical of leaders. They don't grow. There's no way they can grow like that. They've just got to project confidence. They've got to be defensive. They've got to just make sure you don't know where their flaws are because it doesn't feel safe to say, I'm struggling with this. So I have found whenever I'm able to do that, it feels life-changing for me and for the people I lead, that like I'm not in a place where I'm just pouring all the negativity. I'm not even in a strainer place where I can protect you from some of it and you get just the trickle. And I'm not in a shield where I'm harmed. And just like, and I've had that. My staff would say, like, I don't like this for you. And I'm like, hey, like I'm gonna make sure you're okay. But that last one, the shifter, is where you feel like partnership all the way through. Okay, I'm done. Thank you for
Oh, I love it.
process it.
So I know you and Natri also offer performance management systems.
Yeah.
And I expect that they're like this level of working with the system itself so that these manager behaviors become more
Yeah.
manageable, more sustainable.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak a little bit to what you mean by performance management systems?
Yeah, I have a visual for that. So let's
Fabulous.
there. So what we found is that across all organizations, and I've had the fortune of working with quite a few of them, there are four things that matter to every organization. They need people to hit their metrics. Like those data points matter. Donors are not going to fund again. Stakeholders are not going to purchase again. Like we've got to hit our intended impact for our stakeholders. The tactics matter. You have to get stuff done. You can't just show up here and not do the projects that are assigned to you, not follow through on the emails that you're supposed to send. Um, Competencies matter because you need to know what you're doing. When you don't, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes the organization can work with you while you grow and learn and stretch. Other times, you're zapping your manager's capacity, you're zapping your teammates' capacity. I definitely had seasons where I was a teacher and I would work with an underperforming teacher on my grade level, and I'd spend my whole planning block in their room, right? So now it's not a big deal that this person is still learning because they've got the resource, but now I'm burning out. And so at some point, the organization has to say, you've got to level up on the knowledge and skill to do this job. You can't not know what you're doing forever. And then lastly, the orientations, which you just spoke to, the ways of approaching the work need to be codified. So many times orgs skip the step of saying, you need to have initiative here. Proactivity is the thing we care about. Or you need to be a good listener here. If people find you to not be a good listener, then you don't represent our brand well. Another one, you need to be solutions oriented. You need to bring me a solution and not a problem. They have these ways of working that have trickled into expectations, but they're usually not explicit enough for anybody to be accountable to them. And so it looks like we're picking our favorites, right? These are the people they like, and I don't work that way, and there's no space for me. So
Mhm.
pausing to say, like, do we appreciate the fact that people turn things around quickly? Is that a thing that we value? Do we want everyone to do that? Okay. If not, what does that mean for the people who don't fit in anymore? Right. So performance management for us is to clarify what these four things are for your organization, clarify how they might differ based on the staff member and their role and the way you've positioned them in the organization. And then start to explain to people why they matter so much, right? I love being able to help a client say, we have some people who carry more than their share. They just do so much. They're above and beyond in their tactics. Now, they might not be hitting their goals. They might not be hitting their student data, as an example, but it's because they're running this program and this program and this program, and that matters. And we don't want them to feel like it doesn't. And so we need to get our messaging right. And then I think the last thing that's helpful about this model is every manager cares about these things differently. Some managers really care about the soft skills and the way you approach your work, and they give like extra points for that. I don't care if you didn't get that project done. You are such a treat to work with. Like you just bring joy and good energy every time you're in a space. Like you're a valued member of the team. It's okay. Whereas another manager feels like that's nice, but now you not getting that done has created problems for me. And I'm not giving you extra credit for being a great human to work with. I'm actually going to hold you really stringently to getting stuff done. And so, because every manager has their own opinions about this, the system feels very unfair. Feels like, well, depends on who your manager is. You can get away with not hitting your numbers, and I can't. And so what we encourage organizations to do is decide how much do these things matter to you? Is hitting the metrics 50% of what matters? Tell people that. And when I was a teacher, it very much felt like that. It didn't seem to matter that I was carrying more than my share, I was doing all the tasks, I was really knowledgeable and skilled, always in PD. And also just like contributing to culture, making sure that everyone felt cared for on my team. But if I didn't hit my numbers, nothing I can tell you, right? Like, and so you need to just make these expectations more articulate, more clear, and more consistent across your management team so that everybody feels like, okay, I know what success looks like. I know how to get to it. Yeah.
I love that. This could be this process of creating these expectations, setting metrics could be a way to, as you were saying earlier, push up, right? And start to be realistic, like what's realistic for someone to achieve here? How many programs can I run and still hit my metrics and still have the right orientation for this culture, all of that stuff, right? So it's like, this seems to be a method that you could use to shift the system to be more, in your words, empathetic, in my words, realistic about what humans can, what human capacity really is, for
Yes.
sustainable performance. So I thank you for sharing that, Travonnie.
No problem. I hope so, right? I hope that's what this model does. That's what we're in business to try to accomplish. And the other thing that comes out of it once we start to put these expectations on a scale is we get to disrupt perfectionism, where you can say, hey, the bar is here and you're over here. You can keep being over here if you want to, but that's above and beyond. And we didn't ask you to do that much, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's self-directed. And when I was a teacher, me being there from 6 to 6 was no one's expectation of me. I did that to myself because I didn't know how else to like juggle it all or to make it clear that I cared, that I wasn't quite hitting those numbers yet, right? So I think it allows you to say, yeah, you're doing more than you need to. And
And it's
that's
probably
what,
not sustainable. Yeah.
and we care about you being here for the long run. And so
Yeah.
do less, take care of yourself, but you're meeting the bar. Everyone wants to feel like I'm doing enough. And I don't think we do a good job of explaining that to them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm noticing that we're almost to the end of our time here. Is there anything else you want to share before we conclude?
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say is we're working on a resource for our clients in the form of a white paper that talks about how do you get here? I have lots of clients who go, this all sounds right. And changing all of this overnight feels impossible. And we're like, we agree. And so we're working through a resource that says, do this first, and it's going to take about this long. Then do this, and that's probably going to take you about this long. Or you're already here, you skipped these 3 steps. That's why it's so hard. So I think be on the lookout for that tool, the stages of impact that talk about how to get here. And I just want to be clear that overnight this is impossible. It requires a lot of recalibration.
Hmm.
You get it right, decisions are easy.
Well, we definitely will put the links to the resources with this video so people can find the resources and can find you in Nautri.
Perfect.
I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and for humoring me to talk specifically about PK-12 education, because I know our teachers need a lot of support to do the hard work that we've given them. And I think it's going to take many different kinds of expertise to help re-envision some of these large systems in our society, including education and healthcare, right? And finance and all these other ones. So I'm so glad to see you and Nautri working on this area as well. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.